The first bodyguard crumpled without a sound, a tranquilizer dart lodged in his neck. The second was on the ground before he could even draw his weapon, his knee buckling from a targeted disabling strike. The other two members of the security detail, both seasoned professionals, were neutralized just as quickly, overwhelmed by a brutal, coordinated assault that was over in the time it takes to draw a breath. The attack in the grand lobby of the Ascent Grand Hotel was a masterpiece of violent precision. Four men moving like ghosts in tailored suits were now closing on their target. Evangelene Alazar, one of the richest women in the world, found herself completely exposed, a static point in a world that had suddenly dissolved into chaos. Her life was measured in seconds. But as the attackers lunged, the one thing their million-dollar planning and flawless execution never accounted for was the janitor mopping the floor 10 feet away. He moved, and in that instant, everything changed. Elias Vance had been thinking about his daughter's science project. It was a volcano, and she was determined to make it erupt with a satisfyingly messy explosion of baking soda and vinegar. His dark brown hands, calloused and strong, moved on autopilot, pushing the industrial mop in wide, overlapping arcs across the shimmering marble. The scent of lemon cleaner was a familiar, grounding presence. He was a black man in a gray uniform, as invisible as a piece of furniture, a skill he had cultivated for 6 long years. Invisibility was safety. Safety for his daughter was everything. He noticed the men before the attack began, not consciously, but with a deeper, primal instinct. A part of his brain he had tried to starve into silence. It was their formation, a classic diamond flowing through the sparse evening crowd with a predatory grace that didn't belong. It was the way their eyes weren't scanning the magnificent architecture, but were instead fixed on a single point, calculating distances. He saw the subtle bulge under the jacket of the point man, the glint of a well-hidden earpiece. His stomach tightened into a cold, hard knot. This was wrong. Then the attack happened. It was fast, silent, and professional. Evangelene Alazar's security detail never stood a chance. Elias saw the CEO's face, a mask of pure shock. Beside her, her elderly assistant, Beatrice Ingram, stood ramrod straight, her expression not of fear, but of cold, defiant anger. The 4 attackers collapsed their formation, a perfect fluid movement, closing in on the 2 women. The leader reached out a hand, not to strike, but to grab. A kidnapping, Elias's training, buried under 6 years of dust and denial, screamed at him. Threat, principle vulnerable, intervene. His promise to Amara, the vow that was the foundation of his entire existence, screamed louder. Stay down, stay hidden, go home to her. But then he saw the look in the lead attacker's eyes. It was a flat, dead look. The kind of look that didn't leave witnesses. They wouldn't just take the CEO, they would sanitize the scene. The elderly woman beside her, the panicked bellhop 20 feet away, they would be collateral damage. He didn't make a choice. His body made it for him. He shoved the heavy-wheeled mop bucket with his foot. It shot across the slick floor, crashing into the knees of the closest attacker with a wet thud. The man went down, a curse ripping from his lips. The other 3 turned, their professional focus momentarily shattered by the absurd intervention. A janitor. It was all the time Elias needed. He moved not like a janitor, but like something else entirely. He closed the distance in 2 quick strides. The first attacker to face him threw a brutish punch. Elias deflected it, his hand continuing in a fluid arc to strike the man's throat. The man made a choking sound and staggered back. The second pulled a knife. Elias moved in, using the man's momentum against him. A sharp twist to the wrist, a precise application of pressure, and the knife clattered to the floor. An elbow to the temple, and the man crumpled. The leader stared in disbelief before charging. He was big and fast, but Elias was faster. He ducked under a wild swing, driving his shoulder hard into the man's midsection and spinning him around to use as a human shield, just as the 4th attacker drew a handgun. The man hesitated, his own partner in his line of fire. Drop it. Elias's voice was flat, a voice he hadn't used in 6 years. The man tried to get a clear shot. It was a mistake. Elias shoved the leader forward, creating a collision, and his foot shot out, kicking the gun from the 4th man's hand. He followed through with a sequence of strikes so fast they blurred, ending with the man collapsing unconscious. The lobby had descended into panic. Alarms blared. Elias looked at the 4 downed men, then at the 2 women staring at him in utter astonishment. He grabbed Evangelene's arm. "This way now." He pulled her and Beatrice toward a service door marked "Staff Only." "Who are you?" Evangeline gasped, struggling to keep up. "Get in the elevator," he commanded, ignoring her. He pushed them into a grimy service elevator, his eyes scanning the corridor. He hit the button for the penthouse. "When you get there, lock every door. Don't open it for anyone, understand?" Beatrice nodded, her sharp eyes cataloging his face. "We understand. And you?" "I'm not going with you," Elias said as the doors began to close. He turned and vanished down a dark hallway, swallowed by the hotel's depths as the first sirens began to wail outside. 20 minutes later, the lobby was a controlled frenzy. Detective Harding, a man whose weary expression suggested he'd seen everything, knelt by one of the still dazed assailants. "Who hired you?" "The man just spit on the floor," Harding sighed. These weren't amateurs, and they certainly weren't taken down by a janitor. He found Evangelene Alazar and Beatrice Ingram in the hotel manager's office. "Miss Alazar," Harding began, "we've secured the assailants. What I need to understand is what happened with the hotel employee." "He saved our lives," Evangeline said, her voice strained but firm. "He took down 4 trained men as if they were children." "Did you know him?" She shook her head. "I've never seen him before. He was just mopping the floor. He fought with a level of training I haven't seen outside of specialized military units," Harding said, reading from his notes. "He was precise, efficient, no wasted motion. The paramedics said the injuries were disabling, but not permanent. All signs of an expert. Now he's gone." "Find him," Evangeline commanded, her voice regaining its familiar steel. "I don't care what it takes. I want to know who he is." Beatrice placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "We'll handle it, Evangeline. Let the police do their work." She turned to the detective, her gaze firm. "We appreciate your help, detective, but as you can imagine, this is now a matter of private security. We have our own ways of finding people." The 3-mile walk from the bus stop was a necessary decompression, a ritual of shedding one skin for another. It was a moment to decompress from being the only black man in that gilded space. Each step on the cracked pavement was a deliberate effort to leave the man from the hotel lobby behind, to let the adrenaline and the cold, lethal focus dissipate into the cool night air. The ascent grand, with its gilded ceilings and silent terrors, felt a world away from the humble 2-story brick buildings of his neighborhood. This was his sanctuary, the quiet corner of the world he had carved out for his daughter. He let himself into his apartment. The familiar scent of cinnamon and old books a welcome embrace. A light was on in the living room, casting a warm glow. Daddy, a small head with a cascade of tight, springy coils, peeked over the back of the sofa. Amara, his heart, which had been a cold, tight knot in his chest, began to unclench. The tension of the last hour started to melt away in the face of the only thing in the world that truly mattered. "Hey, sweetie, what are you still doing up? It's way past your bedtime." The dark brown child scrambled off the couch and ran to him, wrapping her arms around his legs in a fierce hug that anchored him back to reality. She was wearing mismatched pajamas. "Mrs. Gable let me stay up to finish the base for Mount Amara," she announced proudly. "It's perfect. I used extra glue this time so the lava won't leak everywhere when it erupts." She pulled him toward the kitchen table where a lopsided papier-mâché mountain sat. Elias knelt, forcing a genuine smile. "It looks incredible. The strongest volcano I've ever seen." He looked around the small, tidy apartment, crayon drawings on the refrigerator, a stack of library books on the coffee table. This was the life he had built from the ashes of another. A simple life, a safe life, a life that now felt impossibly fragile. "How was work?" Amara asked, her young eyes perceptive. "You look tired." "Just a long night, sweetie," he said, ruffling her natural curls. The lie felt heavy. There was a big spill in the lobby. Took a long time to clean up. He went through their nightly ritual, a glass of warm milk, a chapter from her favorite book, and tucked her into bed. As he stood in the quiet of his apartment, the adrenaline faded, leaving behind a cold, gnawing fear. He had broken his one and only rule. He had allowed himself to be seen. Back in the penthouse, Beatrice had turned a corner of the sprawling living room into a command center. While Evangeline paced, Beatrice sat, her focus absolute, her fingers flying across a tablet. "How could this happen, Beatrice?" Evangeline asked, her voice a raw nerve. "Here, my security, the best I could buy, taken apart in seconds." "Because you bought security, not intelligence," Beatrice replied, without looking up. "And there is a difference. Your men were prepared for a brute, not a ghost." She continued to type, accessing encrypted databases with a skill that belied her age. Finally, she stopped. "I have a name." She projected her tablet screen onto a large monitor on the wall. An employee file appeared, showing a bland, emotionless photo of a black man with a neatly trimmed beard. "His name is Elias Vance." "What about him?" Evangeline demanded, moving closer. "That's the problem," Beatrice said. "His file is a masterpiece of misdirection, age 36, employed by the Ascent for 2 years. Before that, a series of low-skill, low-visibility jobs going back exactly 6 years. Warehouse stockman, commercial cleaning crew. Before that, nothing. It's a digital brick wall. So, the name is an alias. No, the name is real. The birth certificate is clean," Beatrice explained. "What's fake is the history. To scrub a past so completely to build a new identity this clean and this boring takes an immense amount of skill and resources. This isn't a man who forgot his past. This is a man who buried it in a concrete tomb. Whoever Elias Vance was 6 years ago, he was an expert at making himself disappear." The next morning, Elias was desperately trying to pretend everything was normal. He made pancakes, letting Amara create lopsided shapes that he declared works of art. The Saturday morning cartoons were on, a chaotic symphony of explosions and high-pitched laughter. He was trying to focus on the simple joy of it, but every sound from the hallway outside made him tense. The local news broke in with a special report. "We're getting more details on the foiled kidnapping attempt of billionaire CEO Evangelene Alazar." On the screen, a blurry, pixelated security video played. It showed a figure in a gray uniform moving in a blur, taking down 4 larger men. "Wow," Amara said, her mouth full of pancake. "Daddy, that man moves like you do when you're pretending to be a super spy." Elias's blood ran cold. He snatched the remote and changed the channel. "More syrup?" he asked, his voice strained. An hour later, they were at the park. Elias sat on a bench trying to read, but his senses were on high alert, scanning every face, every vehicle that passed. He saw her before she was even close. The elderly woman from the hotel, dressed in a simple but elegant coat, walking with a calm, deliberate pace. Beatrice Ingram. "Mr. Vance," she said, her voice polite but firm as she stopped a few feet from his bench. Elias didn't look up from his book. "You've got the wrong person." "I don't think so," Beatrice replied calmly. She glanced toward the playground where Amara was climbing. "She's lovely. Her father is a very brave man." Elias snapped his book shut and stood up, keeping his voice low. "Look, I was just in the right place at the right time. End of story. We have nothing to talk about." "4 trained men, Mr. Vance," Beatrice said, her gaze unwavering. "Men who were neutralized with surgical precision. A man with your skills doesn't just happen to be in the right place. My employer, Miss Alazar, simply wants to thank you." "I don't want thanks," he said, his jaw tight. "I just want to be left alone." He called out, "Amara, time to go, sweetie." Amara groaned, but started making her way down. Elias took her hand, ready to walk away, and never looked back. He had taken 2 steps when Beatrice's voice stopped him cold. "They were professionals, Mr. Vance. People like that don't just give up. They will try again." He paused, his back to her, every muscle tense. Beatrice's voice was soft, but every word landed like a hammer blow. And people who get in their way, people they can't identify, they become loose ends that need to be tied up. "Is that a risk you're willing to take for her?" He froze, looking down at Amara's small hand held so tightly in his own. He had run from his past to keep his black daughter safe, and now this quiet old woman was telling him the only way to protect his daughter was to run straight back into it. The cheerful sounds of the park faded to a dull roar in Elias's ears. He looked from Beatrice's calm, serious face to his daughter, now trying to hang upside down from the monkey bars, her laughter echoing in the crisp morning air. She was the sun his entire universe revolved around, the single point of light in a life he had deliberately filled with shadows. And this woman was telling him a black hole was headed their way. Every instinct screamed at him to grab Amara and run, disappear again, find a new city, a new name, a new, even smaller life. He'd done it before, but he knew with a certainty that felt like ice in his veins that she was right. Last night, he was an anomaly, a ghost in the hotel's footage. Now, thanks to the news, he was a mystery. And to the kind of people who organize professional kidnapping teams, a mystery was a threat that had to be eliminated. Running would only make them a target on the move. He took a slow, steadying breath, the internal battle ending as swiftly as it began. Survival had a new definition. It was no longer about hiding. It was about facing the threat head on. He turned back to face Beatrice, his expression a mask of cold resolve. The friendly dad from the park bench was gone, replaced by someone else entirely. "Not here," he said, his voice low and hard. "The cafe on 2nd Avenue, corner of Elm. 1 hour. Tell your boss to come alone. If I see anyone with her, anyone who even looks like security, the meeting is off and we're gone." Beatrice gave a single sharp nod, her eyes showing a flicker of understanding. She had come looking for a hero and had found a professional. She'll be there. Elias walked over to the playground, forcing a warmth into his voice that he didn't feel. "Come on, sweetie, we have to go." "Amara already," Amara whined, dropping to the wood chips. "Yeah, something's come up," he said. "How about we get that extra large pizza for lunch with a pineapple you like and I hate?" That was enough to get her moving. As they walked away, he didn't look back at Beatrice, but he could feel her eyes on him. The trap had been sprung. The cafe was a bustling, noisy place, smelling of burnt coffee and grilled cheese. It was perfect. Glass windows on 2 sides gave a clear view of the street. There were 2 separate exits, and the constant clatter of dishes and conversation made surveillance difficult. Elias arrived 20 minutes early, taking a booth in the far corner that gave him a clear view of both the front door and the kitchen pass-through. He ordered a black coffee he had no intention of drinking and waited, a coiled spring of tension in the loud, chaotic room. At precisely 10 o'clock, Evangelene Alazar walked in. She was dressed in dark jeans and a simple cashmere sweater, an attempt to look inconspicuous that failed utterly. She radiated an aura of power that turned heads. Beatrice entered a moment after her, gave a brief nod in Elias's direction, and then took a seat at the counter, a silent, watchful observer. Evangeline walked over and slid into the booth opposite him. Up close, he could see the faint dark circles under her eyes. She looked less like a corporate titan and more like a woman who hadn't slept. "Mr. Vance," she began, her voice crisp and formal. The voice of a CEO used to being in charge. "I want to thank you for what you did. It was an act of extraordinary bravery. My company is prepared to offer you a substantial reward. A check for $250,000 is waiting for you." Elias didn't even blink. He met her gaze, his own eyes flat and unreadable. "I don't want your money." The blunt refusal clearly took her back. She was a woman accustomed to money being the answer to every question. I see," she stammered, regrouping. "Then what can I offer you? A job? We could create a position for you in our security division. The salary would be considerable." "I have a job," he said coldly. "I'm a janitor." Frustration flickered across her face. This was not a negotiation. It was a stonewall. "Then why did you help me? What is it that you want?" "I saw 4 men about to hurt 2 women, he said, his voice sharp. "It's that simple. I did what anyone should have done. That's all there is to it. There's nothing to discuss. So, thank you for the coffee. We're done here." He made a move to slide out of the booth, to end the conversation and walk out of her life for good. He was already planning his next move. Pack a bag, pull Amara out of school, and be on a bus out of the state by nightfall. It was the only way. Her hand shot out and rested on his arm. Her touch was light, but it stopped him. "Please," she said, and the single word was stripped of all its corporate authority. It was a genuine, desperate plea. "My security is compromised. The police have no real leads. I'm a prisoner in my own home, and I don't know who to trust." "What I saw you do, I haven't felt that safe in years. That's not my problem," Elias said, pulling his arm away, his voice hard. "My problem is a 9-year-old girl who needs her father to come home every night. Taking a job protecting a billionaire who has professional killers after her is the opposite of keeping my daughter safe. I can't help you. I won't." He was about to stand up to make his exit final. Just then, Evangelene's phone, sitting on the table between them, buzzed. She glanced at it, her brow furrowing at the unknown number. She tapped the screen. Her face went pale. The blood drained from it so fast she looked like a porcelain doll. Her breath hitched. Without a word, her hand trembling slightly, she turned the phone and pushed it across the table toward him. It was a picture, a photograph taken from a high angle, looking down at a park, the park they had just left. He could see the jungle gym, the swings, the bench where he had been sitting, and he could see Amara mid-climb, her warm brown face bright with joy. She was circled in red. Elias's breath caught in his chest, his world tilted on its axis, the noisy diner fading away to a dull, rushing roar in his ears. He scrolled down with a thumb that felt numb. There was a single line of text underneath the picture. A beautiful little girl. Next time we won't just be taking pictures. The carefully constructed walls he had built around his life. The 6 years of running, of hiding, of being invisible. They all came crashing down in a single silent moment. They hadn't just found him. They had been watching him. They had been watching his daughter. The choice was no longer his. It had been stolen from him. The roar in Elias's ears subsided, replaced by an unnerving, absolute calm. The fear for his daughter didn't vanish. It crystallized into something cold, hard, and lethal. The man who had been hiding for 6 years died in that diner booth. And the man he was before, the protector, the operative, took his place. He looked up from the screen, and the man Evangelene saw was not the janitor or the reluctant father. It was someone else. His eyes were flinty and cold. All the carefully constructed calm burned away to reveal a core of absolute controlled fury. Who? Elias's voice was a low growl, barely audible, but carrying more menace than a shout. Evangelene was shaken, her composure shattered by the blatant threat against a child. "We don't know for sure." "The police, not the police." Elias cut her off, his voice dangerously quiet. "This is beyond them now. Who wants you gone? Who has this kind of money and this kind of motive? There's always someone, a rival, an enemy. Give me a name." She hesitated, then spoke, the name tasting like poison. "Darian Stryker. He runs Stryker Energy, our biggest competitor. I forced him out of a hostile merger last year. It was brutal. He lost billions, and the public humiliation nearly destroyed him. Our fathers were partners once, a lifetime ago. My father was betrayed and forced out. What I did to Darian was just business, but he saw it as history repeating itself. He swore he'd see my entire world burn." Elias stared at the picture of Amara, circled in red like a target. They hadn't just threatened him. They had given him a mission. The choice was gone. His quiet life was over. The only path back to it was through them. He pushed the phone back across the table. He looked directly into Evangelene Alazar's eyes, and for the first time, she felt like she wasn't the most powerful person in the room. "You want my help?" he said, his voice stripped of all warmth. "You've got it, but the rewards and the job offers are off the table. From this moment on, you do exactly what I say. We use my people, not yours. My protocols, my rules. Your life as you knew it is over. Are we clear?" Evangelene, the CEO who commanded boardrooms and built empires, found herself nodding without hesitation. The terror she felt for the child in the photograph overrode every instinct for control she possessed. "Crystal, good," Elias said, sliding out of the booth. He stood over her, a man transformed. "Your first order is to go home. Tell your driver to take the most direct route. No variations. Beatrice will go with you. Tell her to meet me in your penthouse in 1 hour. Don't speak to anyone else." "And you?" she asked, her voice a whisper. "Where are you going?" A cold, grim smile touched his lips. "I'm going to go pick up my daughter, and then I'm going to make a few phone calls to some people who are even better at being ghosts than I am." He walked out of the diner without looking back, leaving a stunned billionaire in his wake. His first stop was a dusty basement storeroom he rented under a fake name, where a locked chest held the relics of his former life. He retrieved a burner phone, a roll of cash, and a rugged, encrypted laptop. Then he went to get Amara from her friend's house, his heart pounding with a controlled urgency. "Change of plans, sweetie," he said, his voice miraculously light as he knelt before her. "Remember how I said there was a pipe problem at our apartment? Well, it's a really, really big problem, so a friend of mine is letting us stay in a super fancy hotel suite while it gets fixed. It's like a castle in the sky. It'll be an adventure." As the taxi moved through the city toward the Ascent Grand, he flipped open the burner phone. He dialed a number from memory. It rang twice. "Yeah." The voice on the other end was clipped and female, radiating impatience. "Vance, it's Vale," Elias said, his voice low. There was a pause. "Vance, you dropped off the face of the earth. I figured you were dead in a ditch somewhere." There was no warmth in her tone, only fact. "Not yet. I need a ghost protocol on a civilian principal penthouse at the Ascent Grand. Her name is Evangelene Alazar. Alazar, the tech billionaire. That's a big fish. Vance. I also need a trace on a ghost signal encrypted, routed through a shell network. I'm sending you the data packet now." He used the phone to transfer a copy of the photo and its metadata. "Consider it done," Cypher said, and the line went dead. He made a second call. "Zane's Chop Shop." The voice was a low rumble like gravel in a blender. "Zane, it's me. I need a kit. Level 4 and a clean vehicle, something nondescript with a bit of power. Drop point Delta, 90 minutes. Level 4. Zane whistled. "You going to war or something?" Elias said. "Can you do it?" Vance, always. 90 minutes. The line clicked off. He put the phone away just as the taxi pulled up to the rear service entrance of the Ascent. He paid in cash and guided a chattering, excited Amara through the same corridors he had used to escape less than 24 hours before. The service elevator opened directly into the penthouse kitchen. Beatrice was waiting for them, her expression calm, but her eyes sharp. Amara stopped dead, her jaw dropping. The room was larger than their entire apartment building, with windows that seemed to touch the sky. "Daddy," the little girl whispered in awe, "you were right. It is a castle." Beatrice smiled, a genuine, warm expression. "It certainly looks like one. I'm Beatrice, and I believe the kitchen over there has 5 different kinds of ice cream. Would you like to help me conduct a very important taste test?" Amara looked to her father for permission. Elias nodded, grateful. "Go ahead, sweetie." As Beatrice led Amara away, Elias walked into the main living area. Evangeline was standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city below. She turned as he entered. He didn't say a word. He just stood there, his gaze sweeping the opulent room, his mind already working, calculating angles, vulnerabilities, and fields of fire. He was no longer a man in hiding, reacting to a world that had found him. He was a protector, a strategist, preparing for a war that had just been declared on his black family, and he would burn down the world to win it. Elias began his assessment, his gaze sweeping the opulent room, not with admiration, but with a cold, tactical eye. He walked the perimeter, his movements precise, his focus absolute. Evangeline followed him, a spectator in her own home, watching as he transformed her luxurious sanctuary into a potential battlefield. "This place is a fishbowl," he said without preamble, his voice sharp and devoid of pleasantry. He gestured towards the massive wall of glass overlooking the city. "Those windows are a sniper's dream. The terrace door has a standard commercial lock. A 10-year-old could bypass in under a minute. How many staff have access to this floor?" "My personal staff, the hotel management, the executive housekeepers," Evangeline began, listing the people she had always considered trusted assets. "Wrong," Elias interrupted, his tone leaving no room for argument. "As of right now, the answer is 0. No one enters or leaves this penthouse without my direct authorization. Your pilots are grounded. Your drivers are on leave. Your personal chef can take a vacation. From now on, we vet everyone and everything that comes within a 100 feet of this floor. Evangelene stiffened the CEO in her bristling at the absolute nature of his commands. This was her world, her domain, and he was dismantling it piece by piece. My head of security, Marcus Creed, has been with my family for over a decade. He is completely trustworthy. He needs to be here. Elias turned to face her, his eyes hard as stone. Then he's predictable, he countered. And in this situation, predictability is a liability. Your entire security team, including Mr. Creed, has been sent on a mandatory paid vacation, effective immediately. They are not to be contacted. Until my people can do a full workup, everyone is a suspect. Everyone. His authority was absolute. Born not of wealth or title, but of a chilling competence that she could not deny, Evangelene, for the first time in her adult life, deferred completely. She gave a single sharp nod. Understood. An hour later, the delivery from Zane arrived. A hotel catering cart was wheeled in from the service elevator by a man in a chef's uniform who met Elias, handed him 3 heavy-duty Pelican cases, and left without a word. Elias opened the cases on the living room floor. Inside was not an arsenal of weapons, but a collection of sophisticated technology. Compact thermal imaging cameras smaller than a fist, which he placed discreetly above the terrace doors, wafer-thin pressure sensors that he slid under the main entryway rug, a set of hardened satellite phones, and a spectrum analyzer designed to detect electronic bugs. He began the methodical work of installing the gear, transforming the penthouse into a secure command center. When he was done, he opened his rugged, encrypted laptop. A secure video call window popped up. A young woman with spiky neon pink hair and a series of piercings stared out from the screen. She was chewing gum, looking perpetually bored. This was Cypher. "Vance, you look like hell," she said by way of greeting. "Report," Elias said, ignoring the jab. "Good news and bad news," Cypher began, her tone all business now. "Bad news first. The signal trace on that photo is a complete wash. Bounced through servers in a dozen non-extradition countries, layered with military-grade encryption. Whoever sent it has access to intelligence agency-level tech. This isn't some corporate goon squad. Elias, these are serious people." Evangelene, who was watching over his shoulder, felt a chill run down her spine. "What's the good news?" Elias asked, his expression unchanged. "The good news is they're sloppy," Cypher said with a smirk. "Pros at hiding, amateurs at coding. I found a fragmentation error in the image compression, a digital fingerprint. It's not much, but it's a start. I'm running it through every database I have access to, looking for a match." She cracked her knuckles. "Now, about your fishbowl. The building's digital security is a joke. I've already found 3 active backdoors into the internal network, and the guest Wi-Fi is like an open invitation. The system is completely compromised. Burn it," Elias ordered. "Anything you can't secure, lock it down and wipe it. I want a closed private network for this floor only, and I want you to tap into every security camera, public and private, in a 10-block radius. I want eyes everywhere." "Already on it," Cypher said. "Let me know when you have a real challenge for me. I need to get back to digging on your mystery photographer. Cypher out." The screen went blank. Elias turned his attention to the files Evangelene had provided on Darian Stryker, beginning to build a profile of their enemy. For hours, the only sounds were the soft clicking of keys and the distant, happy laughter of Amara as Beatrice entertained her in another part of the penthouse. An uneasy quiet settled over their glass tower as night fell over the city. Late into the night, just as Evangelene was about to retire, Elias's laptop chimed with an urgent priority notification. Cypher's face reappeared, her playful smirk gone, replaced by a look of grim focus. "Vance, we have a problem," she said, her voice tight. "A big one." Elias was instantly alert. Evangelene moved to stand behind him again, her heart pounding. "What is it?" "You were right to be paranoid about an inside man," Cypher said, her fingers flying across her keyboard, bringing up lines of code and financial records on the screen. I started a deep dive into the financials and communications of your top-level staff, cross-referencing them against known associates of Stryker. I found something, a pattern of encrypted communications and offshore payments. Who is it? Elias asked, his voice low. It's not some random guard, Cypher said, her voice dropping. The transfers, the data packets, it all leads back to one person. She put a face up on the screen. It was the smiling, professional headshot of Marcus Creed. Evangeline let out a small, sharp gasp, her hand flying to her mouth. Marcus. Cypher delivered the final blow, her voice cold as ice. He's been selling you out for months, Evangeline. Schematics of this penthouse were transferred from his work terminal 3 days ago, but it gets worse. I've been tracking the burner phone he's been using to talk to his contact. She put a map up on the screen with a single blinking red dot. According to the phone's GPS history, for the last 3 hours, he's been at a private estate just outside the city. The estate registered to Darian Stryker. The betrayal was absolute. The enemy wasn't just at the gates. He had been given the keys to the castle. A wave of cold denial washed over Evangeline, so powerful it felt like a physical blow. No, she whispered, shaking her head, her gaze fixed on Marcus Creed's smiling photo on the screen. Not Marcus. It's a mistake. It has to be. He was at my father's funeral. He's family. Elias's voice, cutting through her shock, was devoid of sympathy. Family doesn't sell your security protocols to the man trying to kill you. The sound of the guest room door opening drew their attention. Beatrice stood there, her robe drawn tightly, her expression grim. She had clearly overheard. She walked slowly into the room, her gaze not on the screen, but on Evangeline's stricken face. I never trusted his ambition, Evangeline, Beatrice said softly, her voice filled with a sad wisdom. Not triumph. He was loyal to your father, yes, but he always felt he deserved more than he was given. He saw you as a stepping stone, not a responsibility. He resented your success because he felt he was entitled to a larger share of it. The confirmation from Beatrice, the person whose judgment she trusted above all others, seemed to break through Evangeline's denial. The shock curdled into the icy sting of betrayal. All those years of trust, of believing he was the one person she could count on outside of Beatrice. It had all been a lie, a long and patient deception. We have to fire him, Evangeline said, her voice trembling with a mixture of grief and a rising tide of rage. I want him arrested. I want him to pay for what he's done. You'll do nothing, Elias cut in, his voice sharp and commanding immediately, taking control of the emotional fallout. If we fire him, if he's arrested, Stryker and his team know their inside man is gone. They'll know we're onto them. They will either accelerate their plan or change it to something we can't predict. Right now, Creed is the only clear view we have into their operation. Evangeline stared at him, horrified. What are you suggesting? That we just let him keep working? Pretend we don't know he's a traitor? A cold, strategic light entered Elias's eyes. He saw not just the problem, he saw the opportunity. We don't just let him work, he said. We use him. We don't cut the line, we feed it. We turn their greatest asset into their biggest liability. The concept dawned on them, as audacious as it was terrifying. They would let the viper remain in the nest, but they would control what venom it delivered. How? Beatrice asked, her mind already turning over the possibilities. What's on your public schedule that you can't miss? Elias asked Evangeline. Monday night, she answered immediately. The Alazar Foundation Gala. It's our biggest charity event of the year. My attendance is mandatory. Canceling would raise 1,000 questions and signal that something is wrong. Perfect, Elias said. A plan already forming in his mind. It's public, it has predictable logistics, and they'll be expecting you. It's the ideal stage for an attack, and Creed is going to help them plan it. You want me to walk into a trap? Evangeline stated, her voice flat. It wasn't a question. You won't be walking into anything, Elias countered, his gaze intense. You'll be nowhere near it, but Darian Stryker and his entire team will be absolutely convinced that you are. The plan was simple in its design and terrifying in its execution. They would use Marcus Creed to leak a detailed but completely false security and travel plan for the gala. They would present Evangeline as a target, making her seem vulnerable, protected only by a skeleton crew following a predictable route. It was the bait. It was also a profound test of trust. Evangeline looked from Elias's hard, determined face to Beatrice's calm, steady one. Her shock and grief were hardening into a cold resolve. They had wounded her. Now she would help set the trap that would destroy them. "All right," she said, her voice firm. "The CEO back in control. What do you need me to do?" "First thing," Elias said, his tone all business. "Creed helped design the security for this penthouse. He knows its layout, its weaknesses, and its blind spots. As of this moment, this location is compromised." "We're moving." "Moving where?" Evangeline asked. "To a sterile location my associate is preparing. We leave tonight." By late afternoon the next day, the plan was ready. Zane had confirmed a safe house was secure. Cypher had prepared a digital file containing the fake travel plan, complete with a hidden tracker that would activate the moment the file was forwarded. All that was left was to set the hook. Elias stood in the living room, a satellite phone pressed to his ear. He had Creed's number. He took a deep breath, shifting into the role of a slightly arrogant by-the-book security consultant. "Marcus, Elias Vance here," he said, his voice casual. Miss Alazar's new consultant just wanted to touch base about the security plan for the gala on Monday. There was a weary pause on the other end. "I wasn't aware Miss Alazar had hired a consultant." "Yeah, it was a last-minute thing. She's a little rattled." "You know how it is," Elias said smoothly. "Listen, she's insisting on going, driving me nuts, but the board says she has to. I've put together a route and a personnel roster. Pretty standard stuff, but protocol says I need the department head to sign off. I'm sending it over to your secure email now." "I'll take a look," Creed said, his voice betraying nothing. "Great." "Talk soon," Elias said, and hung up. He turned to his laptop where Cypher had a monitoring program running. Evangeline and Beatrice stood behind him, watching the screen in silence. Their breath held. "The email is sent," he said into his headset. "I see it," Cypher's voice replied, crisp and clear. He's opening it now, reading the attachment. The second stretched into an eternity. On the screen, they could see the data packet sitting on Creed's server. Then it moved. "He's forwarding it," Cypher said, her voice sharp with excitement. "The attachment has been forwarded from his server to an encrypted anonymous IP address." A map appeared on the screen showing a packet of data moving through a web of proxies. After a few seconds, the final destination resolved into a single blinking red dot. It was over Darian Stryker's private estate. Elias stared at the screen, his face grim. "He took it," he said, his voice low and cold. "The trap is set." The 2 days leading up to the gala were a masterclass in controlled paranoia. The exit from the Ascent Grand happened in the dead of night, a carefully choreographed maneuver that felt more like a spy movie than a relocation. Elias, Evangeline, Beatrice, and a sleepy Amara were loaded into industrial laundry carts by Zane and wheeled through the hotel's labyrinthine service tunnels to a waiting nondescript panel van in a rear loading bay. For Evangeline, a woman accustomed to helicopter travel and armored town cars, the scent of bleach and the rumbling journey through a concrete tunnel was a jarring immersion into Elias's world of shadows. The safe house was a sprawling single-story farmhouse 2 hours north of the city, nestled in a valley and surrounded by dense woods. From the outside, it looked rustic and unassuming, almost forgotten. Inside, it was a fortress. The windows were ballistic glass. The doors were reinforced steel, and a state-of-the-art satellite dish on the roof provided a direct, secure link to Cypher's network. "Welcome to the quiet life," Zane said with a wry smile as they entered. Amara thought it was a grand adventure. "It's a secret clubhouse," Amara declared, her eyes wide with excitement. She immediately claimed a bedroom with a view of the woods, chattering about seeing deer. For the adults, it was a cage, albeit a secure one. The tension was a palpable, living thing in the house. Elias felt the weight of being the protector, a black man taking charge of a billionaire's security. As Monday approached, the hours ticking down toward a confrontation they had orchestrated but could not fully control. On the day of the gala, the house was buzzing with a quiet, focused energy. In a garage a few miles away, Zane was personally overseeing the final preparations for the decoy convoy. They used an exact duplicate of Evangelene's armored town car, complete with matching plates. The plan was for a trusted driver from Elias's network to pilot the car with a mannequin draped in an elegant coat in the back seat to create a convincing silhouette through the heavily tinted windows. Back at the safe house, Elias was preparing himself. Evangeline found him in the main room, shrugging on a lightweight but clearly advanced bulletproof vest under a dark tactical jacket. He was checking the magazine of a handgun with practiced, efficient movements that made her stomach clench. The reality of what was about to happen, that men were going to try and kill a phantom version of her, and this man was going to stop them, was suddenly, terrifyingly real. "This is insane," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "You're all risking your lives for me." Elias looked up from his weapon, his eyes meeting hers. They were clear and steady. "They put my daughter's face on a target," he said, his voice low and intense. "This stopped being about you an hour after we met. I'm not protecting a client. I'm ending a threat to my family. There's a difference." He was a black man standing in the gap for his own. The words hung in the air between them, a declaration that went far beyond any professional duty. He was doing this for Amara, but by extension he was claiming Evangeline and Beatrice as people under his protection, part of his circle. Impulsively, she stepped forward and placed a hand on his arm. The muscle beneath his jacket was tense as steel. "Be careful, Elias. Be." He gave a short, sharp nod, his gaze holding hers for a second longer than necessary. "Always." With that, he turned and walked out, joining Zane by their waiting vehicle. The weight of her world now rested entirely on the shoulders of her former janitor. The trap was sprung at 7:45 p.m. The decoy town car moved smoothly through midtown Manhattan. In a darkened room in the safe house, Evangeline and Beatrice watched a multi-screen display, their hearts in their throats. On one screen was a GPS tracker for the decoy. On the others were a mosaic of dozens of traffic cameras fed to them by Cypher. "All right, Vance, the rabbit's on the move." Cypher's voice crackled through the speakers, calm and professional. "Traffic is normal, approaching the FDR Drive interchange in 5. Elias was in an identical panel van 2 blocks behind the convoy, watching his own monitor. Zane was driving, his massive hands steady on the wheel. Elias's other 2 operators, Marco and Javier, were in a second van, waiting in a prearranged position ahead. "Wait," Cypher said, her tone sharpening. "I've got them. 4 black sedans, late model, no plates, just pulled out of an industrial side street 2 blocks ahead of the target. They're moving to intercept." On the screen, Evangeline watched in horror as the 4 sedans executed a perfect box-in maneuver. They forced the town car off the main road and down a deserted access ramp under a bridge, a concrete canyon with no escape routes. The sedan screeched to a halt surrounding the town car. 8 men in dark tactical gear, armed with assault rifles, poured out of the vehicles. They moved with military precision, taking up positions, their weapons all trained on the lone car. At their lead was a tall, lean man with cold, dead eyes. A man Beatrice identified from a file photo as Leland Shaw. On my command, Shaw's voice, picked up by a long-range microphone, was sharp and clear. "Get out of the vehicle. Hands in the air now." The mercenaries swarmed the car. One of them wrenched the back door open, ready to drag the CEO out. He stopped, staring into the empty back seat. There was no one there, only a small electronic device sitting on the leather. A single blue light blinking calmly. Before he could even process what he was seeing, the device activated. It wasn't a bomb. It was a military-grade communication jammer, instantly cutting off their comms, paired with a multi-directional strobe that erupted in a blinding, disorienting pulse of light. The men cried out, momentarily blinded, their coordination shattered. It was the signal from the shadows of the underpass. From the darkness where they had been waiting, Marco and Javier's panel van appeared, its tires silent on the pavement, blocking one end of the ramp. At the other end, the van Elias and Zane were in screeched to a halt, blocking the only other exit. They were trapped. Elias stepped out of the back of his van. He was no longer a father, a janitor, or a reluctant consultant. He was fully the operative he had spent 6 years trying to forget. A black man shedding the uniform of invisibility. Dressed in dark functional gear, he moved with a lethal grace, a weapon held steady in his hands. A small, powerful speaker mounted on the side of his van crackled to life, broadcasting his voice into the sudden shocked silence. It was cold, clear, and echoed off the concrete walls. Leland Shaw. Shaw, blinking away the spots in his eyes, spun around, his weapon coming up. He saw Elias, a figure of absolute purpose, standing 20 yards away. Behind him, the doors of the other van slid open, revealing Elias's team, armed and ready. Elias's voice cut through the air again. "Drop your weapons. You have nowhere to run." For a heartbeat, the underpass was frozen in a tableau of shock and blinding light. Then Leland Shaw recovered. He was a professional, and professionals don't panic. They act. "Engage," he roared, diving behind the hood of his sedan. The world exploded in a cacophony of gunfire. Muzzle flashes strobed in the darkness, and the air filled with a sharp crack of rifles and the whine of ricocheting bullets. Concrete dust rained down from the ceiling as rounds chewed into the pillars. Elias didn't wait for the command. He dropped behind the engine block of his own van, the position offering the most protection. Zane suppressed the left flank. He yelled into his throat. "Mike, Javier, Marco, move up on the right. Isolate Shaw. I want him alive." Zane, a grim expression on his face, opened up with a heavier caliber weapon, the thudding reports forcing 2 of the mercenaries to keep their heads down. On the right, Elias's other 2 operators moved like wraiths, darting from one piece of cover to the next, their movements a seamless, practiced dance. The mercenaries were good, but Elias's team was better. They weren't just hired guns, they were a unit. Elias's focus was singular, Leland Shaw. He saw Shaw leaning out from behind his car, directing his men. Elias squeezed off 2 precise shots from his handgun. They weren't kill shots. The first shattered the side mirror next to Shaw's head, sending a spray of glass into his face. The second punched a hole in the car door inches from his leg, forcing him back into cover. "You're outmatched, Shaw," Elias yelled, his voice amplified by the enclosed space. "Don't die for a man who's sitting in his mansion." "And who are you?" Shaw shouted back, firing a blind volley over the hood of his car. "The man whose family you threatened," Elias replied, already moving, using the suppression fire from his team to close the distance. He slid behind a concrete pillar, then another, his movements fluid and silent. The firefight was intense but brief. Zane's heavy fire pinned down 2 mercs while Javier and Marco flanked the others, disabling one with a shot to the leg and forcing another to surrender. Within 90 seconds, the only threat left was Shaw. Realizing his men were down and his position was about to be overrun, Shaw did the unexpected. He vaulted over the hood of his car and charged directly at Elias, firing as he came. Elias threw himself to the ground, the rounds whizzing over his head. Shaw's rifle clicked empty. He tossed it aside without breaking stride, pulling a combat knife from his vest. Elias holstered his own weapon and rose to meet him. They crashed into each other with brutal force. Shaw was a whirlwind of controlled violence, his blade a silver blur, but Elias was a wall. He moved with a grounded defensive power, deflecting and parrying, waiting for his opening. Shaw lunged, the knife arcing toward Elias's throat. Elias caught his wrist, twisting it hard. Shaw grunted in pain and drove his forehead into Elias's face. Pain exploded behind Elias's eyes, his grip loosening for a split second. It was all Shaw needed to break free, but Elias was already recovering, his foot sweeping Shaw's legs out from under him. They both went down. Shaw came up on one knee, raising the knife for a final downward thrust. Elias's hand shot out, not for the knife, but for Shaw's shoulder. He found a pressure point and squeezed with all his strength. Shaw's entire arm went numb, his fingers spasming open. The knife clattered uselessly to the ground. Before Shaw could react, Elias delivered a single precise strike to the side of his neck. Leland Shaw's eyes rolled back, and he collapsed unconscious. Silence descended, broken only by the distant sound of city sirens. Elias stood over Shaw's form, breathing heavily, the coppery taste of blood in his mouth. A few minutes later, Shaw began to stir, his hands now bound in zip ties. He looked up at Elias, his expression a mixture of hatred and grudging respect. "This is over, Shaw," Elias said, his voice cold. Stryker played his hand and lost. "Give me the rest of his plan." Shaw coughed, a grim, bloody smile forming on his lips. "You think this was the plan? You think this was about her?" He laughed, a harsh, painful sound. "You're good, I'll give you that. But you're a bodyguard. You're thinking about the body. You never once thought about the soul." "What are you talking about?" Elias demanded, grabbing the front of Shaw's vest. "Creed?" Shaw rasped, his eyes gleaming with malicious triumph. "You were so proud you caught the mole. You used him as bait for us. But he wasn't bait. He was the real play. While you were out here playing soldier, he was at the real target. A cold dread far worse than anything he'd felt during the firefight washed over Elias. The target? What target? "It's not about the money," Shaw sneered. "It's about her legacy." He wanted to wipe her off the face of the earth. Not just her body, everything she ever built. Elias's mind raced, connecting the dots. The gala, the ambush, the distraction. It was all a grand distraction. He scrambled to his feet, grabbing his comms unit. "Cypher, what is Marcus Creed's real-time position? And I need a full diagnostic on Alazar Industries' main servers right now." There was a pause, and when Cypher's voice came back, it was laced with a panicky urgency he had never heard from her before. "Elias. Oh God, his car isn't at his apartment. It's been parked in the executive garage at the Ascent Grand for the last hour. I'm running the diagnostic now. I'm in. There's a ghost program running. It's a full data purge. Military grade. It's a kill switch, Elias. He's not stealing the data. He's erasing it. He's deleting the entire company." In the safe house, Evangeline and Beatrice listened to the comms, watching the feed from Elias's body cam. Evangeline's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. They had won the battle in the underpass. But in a sterile server room downtown, her entire life's work, her legacy was turning to digital dust. For a split second, the victory in the underpass turned to ash in Elias's mouth. He was a professional protector, and he had been completely outmaneuvered. While he was winning a battle of bullets, he was losing the war of information. "Zane," Elias's voice barked into the comms. A whip crack of command. "Package Shaw and his men. Get them to the secondary site. Clean this place up. We were never here. Marco, Javier, you're with me now." The two operators didn't hesitate, sprinting for the panel van as Zane and the remaining team member began efficiently disarming and securing the mercenaries. Elias was already in the passenger seat, his laptop open on his knees. The panicked sound of Cypher's typing filling the air as the van's tires screeched, pulling a U-turn and rocketing back toward the city. "Cypher, talk to me. Can you stop it?" he demanded as the van moved through the traffic. "I'm trying, Elias, but this thing is a nightmare." Cypher's voice was strained, the usual cool confidence gone. It's a cascading data corruption worm. It's not just deleting, it's overwriting everything with encrypted garbage data. I'm building a firewall, but it's like trying to dam a tsunami with sandbags. The backups, God, he was smart. He targeted the offsite backups first. They're 90% gone already. How long do we have for the core systems, financials, R&D, employee data? Less than 20 minutes. For the entire company to become a digital ghost, maybe 30. In the safe house, Evangeline listened, her face ashen. Her company wasn't just a business, it was her father's legacy, her life's work. 30 years of innovation and struggle being erased by the minute. "There has to be something I can do," she said into the comm link, her voice shaking but determined. "The physical servers," Elias's voice came back sharp and focused. "The main farm at the Ascent. Is there a manual override, a hardline cutoff to isolate any part of the network?" Evangeline's mind, trained for crisis, latched on to the problem. The panic receded, replaced by strategy. "Yes, the Genesis core. It's a physically isolated server rack in the heart of the server room. It holds the original corporate charter, the patents for my father's first inventions, the foundational code for our core technologies. It's behind a titanium door with a biometric scanner and a keypad lock designed to survive an EMP blast. If we can physically sever its connection to the main network, the Purge can't reach it. It was a sliver of hope, a tangible goal. I need the codes for that room, Evangelene, Elias said, and the scanner is keyed to you. It's your biometric signature. We have to get you there. The implication was terrifying. She couldn't stay hidden in the safe house. She had to go back to the hotel, the center of the danger, where the man who had betrayed her was waiting. Beatrice, she said, her voice firm. Get your coat, we're going back. Elias didn't waste a second. Zane, change of plans. Rendezvous at the East Side Service entrance of the Ascent. You're bringing the principal to me. ETA 15 minutes, understood. Zane's calm rumble came back. The two vans raced through the night from opposite directions, their paths converging on the glittering glass tower that was now a battleground. Elias's van was the first to arrive. He, Marco, and Javier slipped out of the vehicle and into a service corridor, moving with the silent, predatory grace of a wolf pack. The familiar back halls of the hotel, where Elias had once pushed a mop, now felt like enemy territory. Every shadow, every corner was a potential threat. Cypher, give me eyes, Elias whispered into his throat. Mike, I'm in. Her voice came back, a tense whisper in his ear. Hotel security cams are mine. The service corridor is clear. Creed's heat signature is on the 47th floor, server level. He hasn't moved from the main terminal. Is he alone? There was a pause. Negative, Elias. I'm seeing two other heat signatures stationary, positioned on either side of the main server room door. They're armed assault rifles by the look of it. Stryker had a contingency plan, a last line of defense to make sure the job was finished. Elias relayed the information to his men with hand signals as they began the grueling climb on up the fire stairs. As they ascended, Zane's voice came over the comms. Principal is on site. We're moving to the sub-level staging area. Evangelene and Beatrice were now in the building waiting. The clock was ticking. Elias, Marco, and Javier emerged into the 46th floor stairwell, breathing hard but silent. The air was cold. Below them, a woman's entire legacy was being systematically destroyed. Above them, 3 armed men stood guard over the destruction. Elias checked his weapon, the click of the safety echoing softly in the concrete space. He looked at his 2 operators, their faces grim and ready. They had been in 100 situations like this, but the stakes had never felt so personal. Cypher, what's the clock? He whispered. Her reply was the sound of their doom. It's accelerating. The worm is adapting to my firewalls. You have less than 10 minutes before it hits the Genesis core. After that, Elias, there's nothing left to save. 10 minutes. 10 minutes to fight their way through armed guards and get Evangelene through a locked, biometrically sealed door. Elias looked at his men. No surrender this time, he said, his voice a deadly whisper. We go through them fast and hard. The stairwell door exploded inward with a deafening bang. Elias was the first one through, low and fast, a flashbang grenade already arcing through the air. It detonated in the center of the hallway with a blinding white light and a thunderous crack that momentarily overwhelmed the senses. The 2 guards, trained as they were caught completely by surprise. They staggered back, disoriented, spots dancing in their vision. It was all the time Elias's team needed. Javier and Marco fanned out, their movements economical and precise. 2 silenced shots, 2 pained grunts, and the guards were down. Not dead, but neutralized with disabling shots to their legs. The entire engagement took less than 3 seconds. Zane, bring her up. Service elevator C, now. Elias's voice was a low growl into his mic as he kicked the guards' rifles away. He moved to the server room door, a slab of reinforced steel. The keypad next to it was glowing ominously. He knows we're here, Marco said, taking a defensive position. Cypher, is he locking us out? Elias asked. He's trying to overload the electronic lock. Cypher's voice was frantic in his ear. I'm fighting him for it, but the system is failing. You have one chance to use the keypad before it fries completely. The sound of the service elevator arriving was a welcome chime in the tense hallway. The doors slid open. Zane stood inside a human shield in front of Evangeline and Beatrice. Elias and his team formed a protective diamond around Evangeline, moving her the 20 feet from the elevator to the server room door. Evangeline, now the keypad, Elias urged. Her fingers, miraculously steady, flew across the keypad, entering the 16-digit code. Done the scanner. She pressed her palm against the glowing blue plate beside the door. For a heart-stopping second, nothing happened. Then, with a loud hiss of hydraulics, the titanium door slid open. The room was freezing, the air humming with the sound of a million digital whispers. Banks of servers with blinking green lights stretched to the ceiling. At the far end of the room, by a master terminal, stood Marcus Creed. He held a pistol and his hand was shaking, but his eyes were filled with the wild, desperate rage of a cornered animal. "That's far enough, Evangeline," he spat, the gun wavering between her and Elias. "Why, Marcus?" Evangeline's voice was heartbreakingly steady. "After all these years, why?" "Why?" he laughed, a bitter, unhinged sound. "Because your father gave me a job, but he never gave me an ounce of respect. I was the loyal dog. The furniture and you were worse. You never even saw me. Stryker saw me. He saw my value." Elias slowly moved, positioning himself in front of Evangeline. "It's over, Marcus," he said, his voice calm, trying to draw his focus. "Stryker is gone. My team picked him up an hour ago. You're all that's left." It was a lie, but a good one. For a second, Creed's face flickered with doubt, but the desperation won. "Liar! If I'm going down, I'm taking all of this with me. Her precious legacy." "All of it!" He gestured wildly with a gun. "Elias, 4 minutes." Cypher's voice was a drill in his ear. "The purge is hitting the final firewalls." Evangeline knew she had to move. The Genesis core was a separate, hulking black server rack in a recessed alcove to her right. While Creed's furious gaze was locked on Elias, she took a deep breath and bolted. It wasn't a graceful run, but a desperate, frantic scramble across the cold, raised floor. Creed saw the movement out of the corner of his eye and spun, the gun coming around to track her. No, Elias moved. He didn't have a clear shot without hitting the servers behind Creed. He did the only thing he could. He charged. He crossed the distance in 3 powerful strides, crashing into Creed with the force of a freight train. The gun went off, the shot going wild, shattering a bank of lights and plunging half the room into darkness. They hit the floor in a tangle of limbs. Elias, using his weight and skill, quickly gained the upper hand, wrenching the pistol from Creed's grasp and slamming his forearm into Creed's throat, the throat pinning him to the floor. "It's over," Elias growled. Across the room, Evangeline reached the Genesis core. She ripped open a maintenance panel, revealing a thick bundle of fiber optic cables. "Cypher, which one?" she yelled, her voice echoing in the vast room. "The red tagged cable, the primary network uplink. Pull it, Evangeline. Pull it now." With a desperate cry, Evangeline grabbed the thick red cable with both hands and pulled with every ounce of her strength. For a moment, it resisted. Then, with a shower of sparks and a sound like a giant spine snapping, the cable ripped free from its port. A wave of silence washed through the room. The deafening hum of the main servers died with a final shuddering groan. A bank of emergency red lights kicked on, bathing the room in an eerie glow. It was done. In Elias's ear, Cypher's voice was a breathless, sobbing laugh. "Oh my God, it's done. The connection is severed." The purge. It was nanoseconds from the core's firewall. "It's safe. It's all safe. What's left of the company? It's safe." The tension broke. Evangeline's legs gave out and she slumped against the silent server rack, her body trembling with adrenaline and relief. Elias finished securing a weeping Marcus Creed with a set of zip ties and walked over to her. He knelt in front of her, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "You did it," he said softly. She looked up, her face streaked with grime, tears mixing with the sweat on her cheeks. A raw, exhausted but triumphant smile spread across her face. "No," she said, her voice husky. "We did it." 1 year later, the world was different. Darian Stryker, Leland Shaws, and Marcus Creed were all serving long sentences in federal prison. Alazar Industries, rebuilt from the data saved in the Genesis core, had emerged from the crisis leaner, stronger, and more innovative than ever, with Evangelene hailed as a visionary leader. But the real rebuilding had happened in the quiet moments away from the headlines. They stood in the garden of the upstate safe house, which was no longer a fortress, but a home. A small group was gathered under a crisp autumn sky. Beatrice wiping a tear from her eye, Zane looking uncharacteristically formal in a suit, and Elias's operators, Marco and Javier, standing quietly by. A small drone hovered discreetly overhead, transmitting Cypher's smiling, pink-haired image onto a tablet held by Zane. Amara, now 10, served as the flower girl, ring bearer, and maid of honor all at once, taking her duties with a joyous seriousness. Elias stood watching Evangelene walk toward him. She wasn't wearing a lavish designer gown, but a simple, elegant dress that shimmered in the afternoon sun. She looked happy and at peace. His life was no longer about hiding. As the new head of global security for Alazar Industries, he had integrated his past and present. Their vows were simple, spoken only to each other. "You saw me when I was invisible," she said, her voice thick with emotion as she slid a ring onto his finger. "And you showed me what it meant to be strong enough to be seen." It was a nod to his 6 years of hidden identity as a black man in a low-status role. He replied, his hand finding hers. Later, as the sun began to set, casting long golden shadows across the valley, Elias stood a little apart from the small celebration. He watched his wife laughing as she tried to teach Beatrice a silly new dance. He felt a sense of peace settle into his bones, a feeling so foreign he had almost forgotten what it was like. He was no longer a ghost haunted by the past. He was a husband and a father anchored to the present. He had discovered that true security wasn't about reinforced walls or tactical teams. It was about having a family to build a life with, a home to come back to, and a reason to fight for the light. And for the first time in a very long time, Elias Vance was finally home.